The language of propaganda is important to explore when assessing historical issues. Propaganda summed up refers to information of a biased or misleading nature which is used to promote or publicize a particular political issue or point of view. It can be presented in many ways, such as photographs, videos, or newspapers, and is heavily influenced by emotion. In terms of political situations, such as the Nanking massacre, propaganda is strongly influenced by nationalism, whereby the nation that is being attacked feels as though they need to protect their country's reputation by covering up through media and showing the public only what they wish them to see. The Nanking massacre is a very controversial attack, even to this day, mainly due to the fact that interpretations that are given are very different interpretations coming from the two opposing sides. One argument could state that the use of propaganda distorts historical accounts and changes the public's perception of the massacre. This can be taken into consideration when looking at both the Japanese and the Chinese sides. Although it may have seemed to the public at the time that the information that was given to them was accurate, factual information, both countries used propaganda in different ways in order to portray the situation in a biased manner. One example of propaganda used by the Chinese was the information that was published in a Chinese textbook explaining the occurrences of the Nanking massacre. The extract from the textbook featured a storybook description of the attack rather than just stating the facts. Words and phrases such as bloody atrocities, cruel, most horrible, sea of blood, murderers, and abnormal killing contest were used within the extract. On the other hand, a Japanese textbook simply stated, on December 13, 1937, the Japanese military captured Nanking. The phrases used in the Chinese textbook trigger emotion within the Chinese population and sway them towards their nation's biased beliefs, and in saying that the Japanese were completely at fault. Whereas the Japanese textbook makes it seem as though it is an insignificant event and does not fully describe the circumstances of the massacre. Also, for a while, during and immediately after the Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese government had tight control over the news and media, and even the Japanese people did not know the truth about the massacre. Japanese news described the Japanese soldiers as heroes and never went into detail about any crimes committed by the Japanese military forces. This barred the people of Japan from seeing or knowing the truth about what was occurring in Nanking, allowing them to support their country through something that they were not fully informed about. The use of public figures can also be seen as a form of propaganda due to the fact that the public will listen to a person that is popular within their country and fully take into consideration what they say. An interview for Playboy magazine with Shintaro Ishihara, the most popular contemporary writer in Japan, showed Ishihara declaring that the Nanking massacre never actually occurred and that it was a story fabricated by the Chinese. The use of such a famous person to make a strong statement about the already controversial massacre aided the Japanese due to the fact that Japanese public would easily believe somebody that they perceived as a role model due to the fact that he was someone who represents their country and is seen as something positive for the country. Propaganda distorts historical information due to the fact that the information is influenced by emotional reasoning rather than simply stating cold hard facts. Conversely, propaganda may not distort historical accounts purely because the propaganda is not sufficient enough to cover up the facts that were released. It is very difficult to argue with or question the language used when presenting facts to the public. Katsuchi Honda, a Japanese journalist, documented the massacre in his series of articles called The Journey to China, which were based on interviews with the survivors of the massacre. The survivors of the massacre are the only witnesses to the crime and the only people who would be able to tell the public what actually occurred. The fact that the articles were written by a Japanese writer shows that there was no bias involved, and the journalist was simply recording everything that he had found during his investigation of the massacre. Initially, Hata Ikuhuko, one of the leading Japanese historians, claimed that the illegal murders at Nanking ranged from 300,000 to 42,000 people. However, based on the records of several humanitarian and charity organizations who buried the remaining bodies a week to 4 months after the massacres began, showed that they buried a total of 195,240 bodies. This number excludes those people whose bodies were disposed of by Japanese soldiers and the people who were murdered in smaller scale killings, bringing the death toll to around 300,000 people. Besides the photos and films taken by eyewitnesses, a 190-page official document sent to Berlin from the Nazi embassy at Nanking confirms the duration and magnitude of the massacre. Overall, it is very difficult to ignore the facts presented by people other than the Chinese and Japanese. Therefore, propaganda will not play a large role in distorting the viewpoints of the public. In conclusion, propaganda is a very important aspect in political issues in order to sway people to one side or the other. In the case of the Nanking massacre, propaganda played a large role in convincing the Japanese people that the massacre was not as significant as it was played out to be by the Chinese. However, facts and figures showed people that it was indeed significant, and that the Japanese were hiding the cold, hard truth from their people. Propaganda can sway people one way or another, but there are a select number of people that will not be affected by any propaganda. Therefore, although propaganda may influence people's perceptions of historical issues, there are other factors which may influence their viewpoints further and rule out the effect of propaganda.